Hi, I'm Spike Robinson, and I'm here with my friend Chris Shelton, and we're going to talk about the top 10 times that Star Trek got culty.
Awesome.
Awesome, yeah. Now, we're going to talk basically about the top 10 times that the crew ran into cults on a world or cults visited them. And we're going to do this in the order of, I think, from lowest level of control to highest level of control, in my opinion anyway. And Chris might have a different opinion, and I hope he does.
Yeah.
And if
I
you,
mean, the levels of control are pretty intense in all of these things. It's just a matter of different methods or ways of going about controlling people.
oh yeah,
And I think that's what we're breaking down. You did a pretty good breakdown on this stuff, so
oh yeah.
we'll go
And to
episode by episode. So.
And to clarify, we're not looking at the sci-fi levels of control. We're not looking at the machine levels of Hollywood brainwashing. We're looking at the actual social control rather than the brainwashing machines or the brainwashing robots or the antenna stuck to the heads or things like that.
Right.
Mention them. As you noticed, I gave Chris a list.
And I checked it twice.
Oh, good, good, good. And we're going to find out which civilizations were naughty and which civilizations were not nice.
That's right.
Okay, well, starting with our number 10 is the Gamesters of Triskelion. Now, this is where Kirk, Uhura, and Chekhov are whisked away to a land where technicolor aliens fight for the amusement of three disembodied brains.
Right.
So the sci-fi control is these collars of pain that everybody wears that as soon as the head thrall or fighting slave comes about, he presses a little button, and of course, William Shatner's great at hamming it up, isn't he?
Yes,
I
he is.
love Shatner's hamming it up.
Is they should come up with a phrase for his form of acting. I don't shacting. I don't know. There should be something
Shouting,
for what he does. There's
I need you, Spock.
to get it under control. It's just it's like these periods after every word.
Oh God, it's
Oh,
just so stilted. But the collars of pain, they're a sci-fi control, but when they have the world, they have a lot of what we now call in the biz, born in people,
oh yeah.
where, yeah, the romance of the day, this lovely green-headed alien, and I'll put a little picture of her up on the screen, because thrall training has to also include cosmetology and hairstyles and everything.
Yes, she's
Yeah, she's
hair, man. It's just about as tall as her face.
yeah,
It's
she's a fighter, and yet she's got all this gorgeous. Yeah, I've often noticed that even in the salt mines, the Star Trek women have got these perfect eyes. And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, they're quite something. And of course, Kirk is hookup of the week.
yes. What is love? Well, let me show you.
Yeah, exactly.
Please,
Tell you what love is.
men and women, they help each other. Help me
Yeah,
more. Yeah,
right.
yeah. But the thing is that she is born into this society, and it's like, we don't talk about this. We don't talk about the providers. We don't talk about the ruins that are there. Food is called nutrition. There's no you can see that there's no space for imagination. She talks about her mother. She who bore me was killed in a training exercise.
Yeah,
And she says it
yeah,
so dispassionately.
yeah,
So you,
exactly.
so you
Well,
can
they're very
see.
disconnected, and you listed here points of learned helplessness, and I think that's actually really key on this one is the learned
Yes,
helplessness because they're brought up. I mean, we're talking about a slave society here, and
exactly.
that literally lives. And Star Trek is not one for deep, excuse me, levels of intense realism. I mean, we're not getting into the
No, no.
nitty gritty of how the society works or who's producing what or how many people are even on this planet. How's this all work?
Mhm.
It seems to
Because you
be a
only see the
fairly
same eight
small.
aliens.
What?
You only see the same 8 aliens over and over again.
Well, yeah, I mean, on this one, it seems like the whole world might actually be a fairly small place. You know, you
Yeah.
got whatever machinery is running that's keeping the brains alive.
Mhm.
And then you've got these fighters who I guess the brains are amused by people fighting for, you know, I mean, it could well be that these brains got other things going on in other parts of the society too that they're also amused by. Maybe they have a whole
Never thought
sex
of that.
dungeon. Maybe they got a whole like, you know, little society of really nice people, but they
They've got Big
randomly
Brother on stage too.
you know, who knows? I mean, they could have all. I mean, they, you know, really the imagination's the sort of the limit on that. But they
Mhm.
all have this this thing where these little brains are the ones that are absolutely, completely, totalitarianly
Mhm.
controlling every aspect of these people's lives. And then we get, yeah, Kirk, Chekhov, and Uhura, and yeah, it's
And then, and
not a good time.
then
How'd they get down there
after
in the first place? I guess they just got beamed down there, or they got taken.
they got, basically, they were going to be checking out some weather station, and they were just going to beam down to there, but instead their transporter beam was taken and they went boom, boom to light years away. And
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So
And in fact,
they've
that's the
been grabbed
famous
down.
line where Scotty says, "They just vanished." And Spock goes, "That's the usual thing that happens." And
Yuck, yuck, yuck,
yeah,
yuck.
thank you, Spock.
Thank you
That's
so
not
much.
what the
Yeah,
man meant. But
right.
my thing is that after Kirk confronts the brains, the providers, and he does the fight that he wins, and also, and you know, the deal is that if he wins, the thralls are all set free. And it's like, once they leave, what really happens? Those brains are really going to let the thralls free and educate them. And yeah.
Well, one assumes that the Enterprise is going to hang around long enough to make sure that they at least did the freeing part. But
Or
you know,
yeah.
the thing about the ending of this thing that's actually pretty, you know, unrealistic about that is unless you know, just freeing people, and this is a fairly common misconception, uh, you know, you think that's going to be enough. You
You
know, you
need
think,
to
oh, well, they're
undo,
fine now.
yeah, you need to undo all the slave conditioning. You need
Oh
to
yeah,
teach
I,
them. There was a great guide for a while that IXA was putting out, and I tried to find it recently and I couldn't. And it was called Starting Out in Mainstream America. And it was a handbook written specifically for people who are like in the fundamentalist Mormons, the ones who are actually out in the Utah desert. And it was this, how to get a bank account, how to get yourself into an accredited school, what to look for in a job, how to just fit, how to go to a grocery store and buy fruit. You know, we've talked to our friend Steve and Christian and various other people who specialize in Rachel Bernstein,
yeah,
getting people out. Rachel once said quite tragically, she told me one of the hardest things she had to deal with was teaching these people, that these women, that they had a right to their own bodies.
exactly. And these are people who were raised their entire life not thinking that. So,
Yeah.
so from a, you know, so from a serious perspective of this, if you were, you know, it's not just a matter of letting the brains let the people go.
No,
You
they
know,
have.
this is a matter of like, we've got a whole re-education process we got to do here. How is this society going to be reformed? I mean, this is
Mhm.
sort of one of those things also where you wonder, um,
Does Papa Federation show up?
well, yeah, it seems like this is exactly the kind of situation where the Federation would need and want to show
Send
up.
send
Yeah,
social advisors, like we're going to see
yeah,
later on, like in Return of the Archons. They actually have social advisors left there at the end. And I've seen several very good podcasts and videos about the Federation being its own little
yeah, I know. I know. Same with the Jedi. I know you get these like, the good guys are actually the bad guys. I don't know that I've never really seen the Federation that way. I know that you can write it that way, and you can certainly point to certain stories in the storyline and say,
Yeah,
well, that was pretty authoritarian. That was pretty cool, and
yeah.
that wasn't really prime
Yeah,
directive
like the
following.
J.M. Abrams reboot, which I haven't seen, but
Oh,
I'm aware
yeah,
of. I'm aware of
yeah.
where Spock just basically maroons Kirk on a planet as a punishment. And it's like, what? Come on.
Yeah, there's a number of things going on in J.J.
Yeah,
Abrams
yeah,
movies that
and
are
including the
troubling.
recent one. Yeah.
But
I honestly haven't been into that whole thing. The last series that I watched for Star Trek was Voyager, which is actually my favorite.
oh, wow. Okay.
Not because
Fair
not
enough.
and not just because it's got a female captain who is one of the strongest women characters in any TV show I've ever seen, but also just because of the variety of characters who are not like Next Generation, so perfect, wonderful people, but
Yeah,
real people with real problems, you know,
yeah,
having a real hard time lost in space.
yeah, exactly.
Wait, that's another
Well,
one.
this is yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed the original series so
Mm,
much is I mean it was my first exposure to Star Trek, but it
mm,
was also that it was very much the embodiment of using science fiction to 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 have commentary on current
oh,
events
yes.
and
Yes.
morality issues and stuff like that. And it was pretty obvious about it. The story really, they really had enough structure and framework built there to satisfy the theme of the show more so than they were trying to
Mhm.
build some, do this huge,
Yeah.
tremendous world building exercise in
Or
creating this whole
or
race.
pre-streaming the continuing story. That's why Star Trek Deep Space Nine lost me, is
Okay.
because it became a soap opera about Klingon politics, and nothing bores me more than Klingon politics.
Interesting. Well, I haven't even checked that show out. I'm told it's quite good. So I don't know.
No, no.
But but anyway,
In
as
any
far
case,
as
let's.
yeah, as far as the culty stuff goes here,
Yeah,
you've listed here ingrained loyalty, learned helplessness, and ignorance.
ignorance that they even have any rights.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because if you can, we in today's world, it's
Mm,
really hard to claim ignorance as an excuse for, for truly, legitimately not knowing about a thing, right? Or not
mhm,
knowing
mhm,
something is true or good or right. But that's actually a thing with cults that I don't know that
mhm,
people really, especially in this information age, we've got a whole generation now of people who've grown up with no reality outside of the internet existing.
yeah,
But we've also got people being born into these, 12 tribes, the family.
the
We've
whole
got these
world.
various groups that, yeah, that do not allow their children to watch TV, listen to the radio, watch movies,
Mhm,
wear certain clothes, do certain things, etc. So ignorance actually can be, even in the modern world, not much less in a sci-fi world, can be a legitimate
mhm,
tool of oppression and cult,
mhm.
control.
Even
So
in echo chambers where you're simply not listening to the other side anymore. You're not listening to that advice. I have very, very dear friends because I used to be a pretty active neo pagan. I'm now no longer very, because I'm now more atheistic, agnostic, still pagan flavored, but
yeah.
atheist agnostic. But some of the beliefs that are going on now, particularly 5G network, contrails, and then as a musician, there's this whole thing about A440, which is the tuning note that you hear, being bad for human flesh.
Well, it just goes to show you there's no subject, no field, no area where, silly ideas can't take
Oh
root.
God,
But
it's maddening for me.
yeah,
But in any
exactly.
case, I
Yeah.
think we've wrapped up the games of Triskelion pretty well there, I think.
Well, pretty interesting. Yeah. I mean, the only other point about it that is worth noting or mentioning, I think, on passing here is that you do have a cult system there. The other thing about that system is that it is uh, led by cult leaders. And in this case, it
Yeah.
is three brains who are doing it for sensation, amusement,
Mhm.
pleasure,
And
right?
out of a feeling of superiority. They thralls govern themselves. They can't do that. They're inferior beings.
Exactly. So, so
So
it's
you
just
got your
it's a
yeah.
little interesting because now we're seeing the rise of some cultic groups or activities via the internet that are not necessarily leader centric, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But in this case, we have the leader model in
You
full
have enough.
force
Yeah.
here with these brains and these guys. So, and the I just wanted to comment on the fact that that at the end of the day, um, the motivations here are really no different than any other cult,
No,
that you
they're
see.
so it's just like your predatory person, or what John always says is the narcissistic sociopath, where they're so jaded that they need something for sensation, so they have a bunch of people fight to the death.
That's right. That's exactly right, because that's all they've got.
I've never enjoyed watching fights.
I know, but some people do. Isn't that? It's an interesting
Yeah.
thing, you
Yeah,
know.
I used to date this fellow who loved wrestling and would get angry when I said, "You know that's scripted, right?"
I've never found that to be a very useful or effective line to
No,
counter
and I've always thought it
wrestling.
was, to me, it was like soap operas for men.
Well, that is kind of what it's like. Same as comic books. I mean, comic
Oh,
books are soap operas with superpowers,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know? I mean,
yeah.
so I mean, we can kind of get down on it, but I mean, Star
But
Trek is
no,
scripted.
you need your
It's still
stories.
entertaining, is the point.
Exactly. There we
So
go.
what's our next one here?
Our next one. Our next one is a piece of the action. Now, this one has no sci-fi control whatsoever. It's basically, okay, they decide they have to go to Iosha, which is this world that was contacted before the prime directive, that is the non-interference directive, came into effect, and they left a book called Gangsters of the 1920s, and they go down and they find that this is it's basically a rewrite of Chicago in the 1920s, with machine guns and gangsters, and the control is basically the fear of getting shot,
Right.
and a bunch
Kind
of
of a,
bosses.
yeah, it's a little bit of a silly episode, and yet it was also ranked apparently one of the best in terms of one of the best and most comic episodes of the entire series by many reviewers.
Indeed. Indeed. And it was.
Uh,
I mean, it's got the greatest Spock line ever. "I'd advise yous to keep dialing, ox mix."
right.
It's
Well, good
supposed,
stuff.
that's supposed to be a Chicago accent. That's a New Jersey. They've all got New Jersey accents.
Yeah.
Even
Well, it seems
Shatner, who was from Montreal, has a New Jersey accent in it.
it doesn't seem to particularly have. It's more of a criminal, more of a than a culty sort of a societal setup with this thing about the criminal gangs in the 1920s. So yeah, you have fear of violence, gang loyalty. I mean, yeah,
I
it's
would say, though, a criminal gang can operate a lot similarly to a quote unquote cult, because there's still
yeah.
the loyalty, there's still the control, there's still the absolute power of this guy stroking a white
I
cat.
mean, yes,
You see, then the fear, the inability to leave peacefully, the
yeah. I mean,
clubbiness.
I guess
There's no overwhelming belief system.
that's the thing.
Yeah,
It's
there's
really
no
all centered
overwhelming
around
belief
money.
system. So it's like a cult without a belief system.
Well, it's a cult around that's built around either personality or money, and or both. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, I kind of I go, yeah, well, there's a group that is engaged in extreme criminal behavior,
Mhm,
but without those core, us versus them, black and white thinking,
mhm,
and this sort of mission or purpose that cults tend to get onto.
yeah.
I look at it more as a corrupt form of corporate or business
Mm.
activity, Um,
And
I
also,
don't know. It's a funny.
yeah,
I'm obviously not sitting here saying that there's no cult activity in
no, no.
lobster worlds, but
But there is also some level of freedom too, because there's one
yeah.
point where two, I think they're supposed to be prostitutes, walk up to one of the henchmen and actually complain.
Okay.
They actually say, we paid our percentage and yet the street lights aren't on at night.
Hmm.
And they're actually able to, by petition, complain. So this is why it's very low on the list.
Yeah. Well, I
Because
agree
even
with
though
that.
there's the
Yeah.
control of it, yes,
Yeah.
there's no overweening, um, there's no overweening, idealism. There's no, as you say, black and white thinking. Really not. It's basically whichever gang boss you're loyal to, and that's whoever's you have. I have the idea that these guys with machine guns, if somebody else took over their territory, they would have no problem switching loyalties.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So it's so unless you build up a cult of personality inside that group around the mob boss
yeah.
or
And
family
seeing,
or whatever, then it gets it's not exactly the same thing,
yeah, and
but
seeing how
similar enough.
easily
Certainly
they
methods
all
of
get
control.
together at the end. Now, of course, that's TV magic, but it's still at the same time. Yeah, so it's lower down. Yeah, but I still felt it needed to be addressed,
Sure.
basically.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, well then how do you feel now? These ones seem to me, the next two seem to me to be totally like that again. That
Yeah.
is that,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Then we've got 9, 8, and 7, and they are almost exactly alike. The same episode, just written in different places and with different tones. So we got Bread and Circuses.
Yeah.
We've got. They loved to do this. It's just like Earth, and you just like, yeah, right. They're going to have the same names for the same deities. They're going to have the same architecture.
Exactly.
And the
Well,
humans don't even have
the
anything
idea
glued to
with
their foreheads.
yeah, well, we got bread and circuses, which is the idea that what if Rome never fell as an
What if
empire?
Rome never fell?
Which would lead to a very interesting alternate reality timeline, which they probably
Mhm.
didn't think through too much, except to
Yeah.
put television cameras in coliseums and say, "There you go."
And sell the Saturn 220 as a car or something.
Right, right, exactly,
Neptune bath salts.
right. Which we already do.
Yeah, we already do. So it's like,
So it's kind of like, all right.
yeah. But and
Um,
also the thing is, then there's the little group that you've tried. They're the sun worshippers, but you find out they're the Christians, and Christ's message is going to get out. Yeah.
yeah, that was
Really?
eminently silly to me. That
Yeah,
that
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 was
somehow
very, very silly.
that somehow that was also going to parallel on a completely different planet.
Mhm.
But obviously, again, this is where story sort of takes a back seat to, the theme and that they're trying to develop. And you get,
And yeah,
of course, totalitarian states, propaganda.
propaganda. Yeah, that's the
you know,
thing, was it was the propaganda machine that really caught my eye.
right.
It was the little dial saying applause and boos and hisses, and
Of course.
yeah, that, and also just the way that slaves had become
I
institutionalized.
learned enough surprising stuff about the Roman caste system and Roman classes and stuff like that to realize that it was such a different society. I
Yeah,
tend to hesitate to make, direct comparatives between it and how we are now
yeah.
because of that reason. I mean, there was, I learned just, you learn a little bit and you just go, oh my God, that's really different from what we're doing now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you can't quite really lay a template of our society on top of
No.
theirs and go, oh yeah, same, same. Very different. They're the
Yeah,
way
and their
they,
slavery was different than what we experienced in the first half of this country's history.
oh, very much so.
Very
And
much
it
so.
was very
There were
institutionalized. Yeah,
totally different.
I know, it's bad stuff.
Yeah, it
Um,
is bad stuff.
all right. Well, as
But
far
it's
as,
kind of like, but then again, it's like patterns of force here, where instead now we've got, what if this guy, and this was due to somebody going, that Kirk knew, going off and introducing Nazism to a planet where the neighboring planet had already come over to try to civilize their neighboring planet, and then they
Right.
became the out. And this one is noted for the hated out group.
Well, it's interesting how this was season 2. So this was 1968.
Yep.
And I don't know if you are aware of this, but there was an incident at a school in um,
Oh, are you talking about the wave?
the Wave. That's
Oh,
right.
yes. The wave
1967.
happened around then too, didn't it? I didn't even align
1967.
that. That
Yeah.
was in 68.
60, yeah, the Star Trek episode was in 68, and the actual events of what were later documentaried into the wave, the third wave or the wave, that was 1967. So just and for anybody who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about right now, what I'm talking about is a real world incident that happened at a school. I think it was in Palo Alto, California in 1967. There was a teacher who decided that to answer his students' questions about, you know, you'd have to be an idiot to fall for this Nazi crap. Who could possibly, why would anybody fall for this? Is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. The Germans were a bunch of idiots. You know, this kind of rhetoric.
How did the whole country decide to vote away their right to vote and then start killing 6 million people of a various list of out groups, not just the Jewish folks, but the Romani, the homosexuals, the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, basically anybody who wasn't, you know, Aryan German. So how does this happen?
Yeah.
And in a disturbing series of events that followed over the next week, this teacher started indoctrinating his students purposefully with Nazi rhetoric. He started using Nazi propaganda techniques on his own students to show them. Now, and he started using, there was a particular hand sign that he used. There was a, you know, there was this like salute, there was this solidarity, there was you know, there was a sort of unity through, you know, fill in the blank, and every day it was a new lecture. Basically, he made a little cult out of the school.
And there was a set way you could answer questions. You couldn't do any. There was no you know, coloring of questions or considerations. Things had to be short, yes, no, black, white.
Well, I don't remember that, but I do remember that
the questions had to be answered a question with no nuance.
Got it. Okay, cool. It was well, it was a recreation of the Nazi, you know, propaganda in order to show these students, teach the students a lesson. It only took 5 days.
It was scary. I'll put a link in the description below.
Yeah, you guys should check that out.
You got to check it out.
To me, how this comes a year after, and it's a Star Trek episode about, you know, a guy who introduces the Nazi system because it was a very efficient system. It was a very, you know, it got things done. Production was
the Autobahn, the Volkswagen, and Fanta.
Right. Well, there you go.
I love Fanta.
And the T4. You know, we won't talk about that. So, and of course, as with, and it's funny. I never connected the dots on these two things, the actual wave and then this show, but they're both, of course, on my mind these days. And the timing on this, I mean, this is within a year of that actual thing happening. They do this Star Trek episode recreating the exact same mistake that this man made on a planet-wide scale. And I won't spoiler alert what happened in the wave. I won't spoil that except to say, of course, you know, there were consequences, and there were some bad ones, and it was pretty.
Spoiler alert for a 53-year-old story.
Yeah, well, it's not too many people know about it, actually.
Yeah, that's true. So, that's true.
Anyway, interesting real-world parallel there, but obviously with the Nazis, we know, you know, I mean, they checked every box.
They did, and it was very, very interesting to see a Kojin dog, and the dehumanization of the out group, and then also, yeah. But I would say that Piece of the Action, Bread and Circuses, and Patterns of Force are all very, very, very similar episodes, just set in gangsters, Rome, Nazis.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So, moving right along, this one I love. For the world is hollow, and I have touched the sky.
Right.
Number 6. Okay, this one starts with basically us finding out that McCoy's gonna die within a year, but they also have to go chase after this asteroid that's on a collision course with one of their planets, and they find out that the asteroid actually is hollow with people living inside, and the people think that they're actually on a planet. Have no idea they're on an intergenerational spaceship.
Right.
And the
They
sci-fi
they never really address in the episode how that happened, whether that was purposeful or whether it was just a
yeah,
degeneration
it
of
just got
knowledge.
forgotten over time. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you think if you were going to land somewhere else, you might want to give your folks a heads up about it instead of just, because instead the directions are locked away in this little obelisk in their sanctuary, and only one person, the high priestess of the people. They also, the sci-fi control is these little buttons, once again, pain generators, because pain is, abusive situations, abusive households, families, marriages. The threat of pain is just as good a control as the pain itself.
Well, or so they thought, and
So they
so they
thought, yeah.
used in this. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of these writers are coming out of, their schooling of the 40s and 50s where conditioning
Oh
was
yeah,
the,
yeah.
you know,
Pavlov conditioning. Yeah.
was the vogue, the in vogue thing for psychiatry to be studying. And you
Mhm.
had Skinner and his Skinner box, and and
Yeah.
some really nasty types in the world of psychology and psychiatry, talking about how man is just as much a stimulus response creature as a dog, and look at Pavlov's dogs, and so therefore we're gonna.
Mhm.
And it was all about, I mean, I don't know that people really get like how sidelined psychology was as a
Mhm.
subject for about 2 decades on this conditioning thing, where they just thought it was
Yeah.
all about animal
So,
conditioning
yeah.
and this is what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so this follows kind of along, a lot of Star Trek follow this pain business made me think of that. I wanted to comment on that during the show
Mm.
here, that
Mm.
this comes out of this school of thought that was prevalent in the 40s and 50s,
Mhm.
in psychology. And so the writers of these episodes, having heard about this or learned about it, this is current thinking on how you control people. Is, you stick some device in them that will
Yeah.
shock them or
Just like
pain
the
them.
pain collars in the games of Triskelion,
That's
little
right.
tiny thing, and oh,
Yeah. And
yeah.
obviously you are going to control people if you have stuff like that
I
connected
will
to them.
say, as a survivor of domestic violence myself, um, it was more the threat of domination than the actual pain, because the actual beatings didn't happen all that often. It was more the intimidation and the whole atmosphere. The actual violence is a very, very small piece of
Yeah.
actual domestic violence as it's practiced. Yeah,
And
so.
but these people, the thing that works with these folks is because you have obviously. I mean, my point there is that when Kirk and McCoy and these guys enter the scene, and they are and they're going to be hurt and hurt and hurt, and that's how we're going to control them. It doesn't really work as well as it seems to work on the rest of the population, and the reason for that is because pain alone is not an adequate form of control to keep people 24/7 under your
No, you're
influence.
going to need your learned helplessness. You're going to need your cultural control, your
Right.
societal controls. We do not speak of that.
Exactly.
We do not speak of that. And then there's that old man that wanders in, and his little thing is blowing through his temple, going, "For I, the world is hollow, and I have touched the sky." And
Right.
and telling them that, because it was forbidden, it's forbidden to go towards their mountain. You never see their mountains. All you see is their little hallways, which are the same sets that they use. Well, shoestring budget, 1968,
Exactly.
1967 to 1969.
Let's go to the next one.
Let's go to the next one. Yes. Oh, now this one I put in because, and the children shall lead, number 5. This one I did because it shows grooming. It's
Exactly.
not the power, it's not the controls. Okay, let's first explain that they go to some outpost and all the adults have killed themselves and the children are happy and playing and fun and having a good time. And there's this spooky cave that Shatner freaks out very convincingly in. And then they take the kids on board. And can we go to X? No, you have to go to this space station because this is where we're going. And pretty soon the kids go, doom, doom, doom. And they can make Sulu see knives on the screen and Uhura see her face growing old. And
Right. They have this superpower of mental manipulation.
But that's not the mental manipulation. The manipulation that I want to talk about is their friendly angel.
Exactly. So they've been being groomed by this
Ghost
ghosty guy, and he's the hidden influencer because he's invisible to the crew. The crew's not aware that this entity is around or that he's influencing these kids.
He does appear to them later, though.
Well, yeah, of course, but at the beginning, of course, they're total mystery as to what the hell's going on. Because these kids are more focused, more purposeful, have more direction than kids should seem to have, Not to mention the inappropriateness of them all running around, loving life when all their parents are dead. So it was
dancing on their parents' graves. Literally.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
it is.
And this kind of shows the degree of manipulation that the right words given in the right way, can have on somebody, especially on young minds, because these are minds that are not yet developed enough to engage in critical thinking or to question what's going on around them. And this is why the second gen cults we've been talking about with these populations of people in these earlier episodes are so dangerous, is because you never give them the opportunity to question.
Yeah. The other thing about these kids is that the way he speaks, the way the friendly angel speaks to me. Have you ever watched any JW broadcasting? JW.org broadcasting?
I've seen a couple here and there, but not enough to be able to.
What cadences? We are strong and they are weak. And we are friends and our friends will join us. It's the exact same pseudo-hypnotic cadences of we are this, they are that, we are this, they are that. Very, very, very interesting to take that friendly angel and then look at I'm trying to think of one of the governing bodies who I've heard speak, and they're all
their names,
but
yeah.
Well,
exactly. And also again, the right messaging I talked about, how you have to have simple words.
Yes.
It's stated in a simple manner, you know what I mean? So yeah, the cadence or the rhythm is definitely a thing. The fact of the simplicity of the words, the messaging is very simple. These are mantras, really,
And very black and white, us versus them. They are our friends. They are our enemy. They are weak. We are strong and very, And then also
very much playing on that cult playbook.
Also the thing that happens is when the kids break away, suddenly they're crying over their parents' death.
Right.
Now that would take a lot longer to do than just that. I'm sure it would have to.
I'm glad they put it in the episode, though, just so it was clear that now there was a restoration of appropriate emotions.
Yeah, a 30-minute episode is going to have to truncate time a bit, but it reminds me of like people after leaving Scientology mourning parents who have died when they just dropped the body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, or for me, my personal one, my grandfather passed while I was in my cult. And I did not mourn him because he was just a construct. I didn't mourn him till after I got out.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's amazing how they can shut down.
they can shut down.
You know, emotional control is not an easy thing to do.
No, but
it's the hardest thing of the three of the four in the bite model to do, I think. But it is and that's why I think it's also the most powerful. You really don't get too far with the other three if you don't engage the emotions.
Yeah, that's why so many of the XJWs go, why doesn't my friend listen? I've given him fact after fact after fact after fact. It's like, facts don't matter. We are emotional creatures. Jill Bolt Taylor says it best. We think we are thinking creatures that feel. No, we are feeling creatures that think.
Okay.
Yeah, so of course the emotional control is, it's the hardest thing to get rid of.
Yep.
It really honestly is.
Exactly.
So, and also just the way that they go all of a sudden, crying over, now they're okay. It would probably take a lot longer than that.
Well, what do we got next?
Number 4, the way to Eden. This one is the Enterprise intercepts a stolen shuttle full of 3 free thinkers who are looking for the planet Eden. And
yeah, this is a wild one.
This is this famous space hippie one.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
You get to see Spock playing his harp, and it's very fun. And there's that guy who sings, and
yeah, this was one of the last original series episodes. This was season 3, episode 20.
Yeah,
and this was full on hippies. This was getting your groove on. This was the cult leader with the big ears. And he was a doctor, and so he had the authority, so he had a title, he had
I don't tell them what to do, but he was telling them what to do. He's like a Charlie Manson figure, basically.
Exactly. It was very, very, very much presented as this controlling authority figure, not lunatic eyes, not crazy beard like Manson, very, very put together. But leading up this, this very groovy cult of people who had their eyes on taking over the Enterprise and almost succeeded. And they, it's hard. It's I think impossible to watch this episode with a straight face, given the timely, nature of the hippie aspect of this. I mean, it's pretty deeply.
Singing.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And Spock getting his groove on is pretty funny.
But
it does show very, very clearly how when you have a group of people who are on the path of a beautiful, wonderful, best of all possible worlds kind of cult, then that end justifies any means. So these guys coming in and taking over the Enterprise, lying, coming on to people, doing whatever, all the little things they were doing was
they were doing flirty fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. All fully rationalized or justified because of this, ultimate, beautiful, happy ending that they all think they're going to achieve. And I was happy that this show ended in the tragedy that it did with these people dying, because it really showed a real world consequence for having not only for their actions, for having tried to take over Federation ship, et cetera, but for falling for this guy and his messaging. It was a fatal mistake for these people. And I was glad that ending, while the show itself was pretty goofy, it put a somber and right note at the end, I thought. And I just wanted to comment on that.
Exception, the girls lived.
Yeah, I know. Not
everybody died. Just
they didn't
that singer dude.
It was the 60s, so they can't have the women dying, just the men.
Yeah.
But they did.
The singer dude had to die, though, because he was singing just so badly. Wally and I were watching this a couple weeks ago, and he was singing, and we're both pretty good at our ears for pitch, being musicians, and we were going, oh!
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty
Yeah,
bad.
but the other thing is that doctor who he has a disease that if he goes down to a planet where he hasn't been inoculated, he will cause a plague. He will pass off his disease to the unprotected people, and they will all die. And yet he does this wonderful double speak of "I do not recognize your authority," and he's very, very. I mean, I've seen this in so many cult leaders where I don't recognize your authority over me. I don't recognize this. I don't even believe in your truth, even though I know it. He's
Yep.
very selective over what he says he believes at that moment. And he's very careful, like the gal who's actually old friends with Chekhov. He reassures, oh no, it's just good that sonic wave we're putting on them is just going to knock them out. It's not going to harm them.
Mm.
And the other guy goes, but it really is going to harm them. Yes, but don't tell her.
I don't remember that part, but okay.
Yeah, they're when they're taking over the ship, they put on that high sonic beam to knock everybody out. And the girl says, but that's going to kill them all. And he goes, no, no, no. I've got it, set it so it won't kill them. And
Oh,
then
right.
another member of the cult says, but it is going to kill them. Yeah, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty nasty stuff.
Yeah, yeah, some pretty nasty stuff. But it's interesting that at the end, Spock says, don't give up your search for Eden yet.
Hmm.
Instead, but he's, you're going to find it, but it's not going to be through a leader or through an ideology. You're going to find it in yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Cool.
it is a cool episode, though. I really love it. And then I've got the picture of a group of free thinkers led by a man who tells them they're free to think exactly as he does.
Exactly.
Okay, now number 3. This one is, we got another totalitarian society. It's the Cloudminders. Number 3, season 3, episode 21. Spock and Kirk go down to get some xenite, which is some sort of medicine or other, and they find themselves entangled in a labor dispute between the world's leisured upper class who live in the Sky City and the people, the troglodytes, who are laboring down below. So you've got this divided society of all the people who are artists and they're wonderful and they're living in Cloud City, and then there's the people who actually do all the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're an
definitely very
underclass.
classed. I mean, this is really sort of the Time Machine revisited in
Oh, it
in
is.
terms of its breakdown of the class system,
Mhm.
the undergrounds,
Right down
workers
to troglodytes.
and the above the cloud dwellers.
Yeah, it's and the
Yeah.
word troglodyte too, right? Wasn't weren't the in Time Machine called troglodyte? I can't remember anymore. But also that in the sci-fi control, the xenite gas keeps the workers dumb-witted and angry and unable to think. But when they're brought up as servants to the Cloud City, suddenly they get all uppity.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
it's an interesting thing because they're not aware of this. The guys at top, they sort of whatever with the effects
yeah.
of this gas, this drug, and and it's just it's an interesting episode, but it definitely does highlight class disparity. I think more so than
Oh,
anything
yeah.
else.
And also the whole idea of the ignorance of the underclasses. Well, they're not like us. What would troglodytes do in our city, as Drusilla says? And for some reason they gave the love interest to Spock in this episode. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm pretty sure they wanted some more of that. But I mean, this was the end of the 3rd season. I think Kirk had
Kirk had kissed enough green
left enough
alien.
fields at this point that they were willing to give a few of the other actors a go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then also what I love is the line, oh, but we've banned all forms of violence.
Oh
And then
God,
you see
yeah,
them torturing a rebel.
exactly.
Torture isn't violence.
Well, the doublespeak of authoritarian, societies.
Exactly.
Yeah, obviously.
Exactly, exactly. And the cultural indoctrination that we're better than them, and then we don't get to see what the troglodyte society is, because it's kind of
Not
interesting.
too much. We see a little bit, but not
We
too
see
much.
a little bit, and it seems like they have a much more democratic system, because there's one point where one of the other troglodytes is speaking to the gal, and she's trying to give him an order. He says, "Wait till the rest get here, then we will all say."
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, it's troglodytes.
Oh,
By the
troglodyte. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
For
Troglodyte,
those
not
purists out
troglodyte.
there who've been hearing troglodyte, yeah, it's troglodytes.
Sorry. Bad
Looking
spike,
at
no biscuit.
just looking at the Wikipedia page
You're
here, but
right. You're right. And is it xenite with a Z or with an X?
it is with a Z.
It is with a
Right.
Z, and I've been
It is.
pronouncing it with an X. See?
Wow. Zenite.
Bad spike, no biscuit.
Bad spike. All right. What's my next one here?
The next one is, oh, I love this one. Another totalitarian universe, Mirror, Mirror. Season
Yeah.
2, Episode 4. Kirk, Uhura, Scotty, and McCoy find themselves transported to a mirror universe where the Federation is a totalitarian empire, assassination of your superior is the accepted method of career advancement, and Spock has a goatee.
Right. Yeah, this is one of the more famous original series
It is.
episodes because it has this sort of the altered,
Mhm.
personalities and a whole nother universe sort of
Mhm.
thing. Well, yeah, this one's pretty wild.
It is.
It's a whole, I mean, cult wise, it's sort of more of a, what if you reimagine the Federation in this sort of, more hardcore authoritarian militaristic sort of thing where they go around like the Klingons and take over planets and rule the galaxy sort of thing. And, they've got the technology to do it. So,
And yeah, and basically, once again, like the middle ones that we talked about, there's not so much black and white thinking, but there is the fear of living in a totalitarian government. There's the
yep,
little agonizers that they
right.
wear on their belt, and Spock saying, "Hand me your agonizer." That's like being made to cut your own switch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They definitely have this whole built-in system of control thing going on
And then
with
the agony booth, which gives Walter
yeah,
Koenig a chance to go, "Ah!"
right.
Very,
Yeah.
and just the basic fear, but there's not too much actual other than the totalitarian government. And also, it's interesting, I'm wondering how much rights the women have in this Star Trek, because they've got the very sexualized outfits,
Yep.
rather than the, at the time, empowering miniskirt. We look at a miniskirt today and we think, oh, she's being sexualized. Back then, the miniskirt was supposed to be empowering.
Yeah,
Frankly, I've never had the legs for
I
that.
don't really have that problem with mini skirts personally, but yeah, okay.
What else can we say about this other than it's just, and then the whole fascist salute?
Yeah, I mean it's 1984 meets Star Trek, it's pretty much
Basically. And yeah, there's not much there. Now we get into, before we get to our number one episode, we wanted to talk about a couple honorable mentions.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that have the more Hollywood version of what a cult looks like.
Yeah. Well, this one is
The Apple.
Yeah, the Apple here. This is season 2, episode 5. This one is straight up cult.
Yeah,
I mean,
straight
just
up
every
cult.
box checked off. Just boom,
Every
boom,
box
boom,
checked
boom.
off. But
It's a
the
cult.
thing is, yeah, they're spending their days. They're very happy. They're very insular. No sex. Just being happy people, all dressed alike with the little face painted. Are those supposed to be face painted or actually part of their skin tone? The little
Well,
triangles, circles, and squares on their cheekbones.
yeah, they have those symbols and stuff. I don't know, but one thing that I did have a problem with, and this is actually one of the last Star Treks that I actually watched. I remember this episode pretty clearly, and the thing that was really off about this one is it wasn't really clear how these people were being subjugated or suppressed
Yeah,
in
it's
the situation.
yeah, it's just the communication, the little antenna that the lead guy wears, and then he just relays Vol, the giant stone lizard is called Vol, Vol's orders to everybody else. How did that come about? We have
Well,
no
not really
idea how that came about.
clear,
How
but
did you start? Because they say in an offhand remark that this is a very high technology object, this giant stone lizard.
mhm,
But he needs for years and years and years and years, I thought that they were just feeding Vol vegetables.
mhm.
But then Wally, my husband, pointed out to me that they're actually feeding him those exploding rocks.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Well, it's clearly keeping it energized is the
yeah,
point. And
it's the point.
so this is a weather controlling, environment controlling supercomputer, right? That sort of
Hmm.
keeps this area of the planet nice and habitable and
Hmm.
keeps these, meat body people alive. And they're just sort of existing. There's not really a whole lot of point to their existence, but
No,
at the
and they're
same
yeah.
time, there's nothing really destructive going on here. And this was the objection that I had to Kirk coming in and just willfully, blatantly violating Prime Directive.
Throwing the Prime Directive right
Just
out
threw
the
it out the
window.
window,
And yeah.
right? Because he basically looked at the lifestyle of these people living peacefully, no war, no conflict, no violence.
Mhm.
Everybody's getting along, everybody's eating, everybody's sleeping, everybody's happy. They're existing.
Go
And
on the other
he looks
side.
at that and goes, well, this isn't good enough.
Hmm.
I say there should be purpose. I say there should be sex.
Hmm.
I say there should be conflict. Well, thanks, Kirk.
And
You know,
yeah, but there's no self-determination. There's no children. There's no, yeah. I can see, I see that, yeah, it is kind of
they're happy.
also,
If you want to start introducing, these concepts or something, I mean, these people are living very long lives. That was another
they're
part of the
immortal.
episode.
They're
Yeah,
essentially immortal.
you're right. So they were fine.
Hmm.
Like, how do you imagine? I don't know. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
they don't,
I won't go
they're,
bringing religion
they're
into
laughing, they're happy, they're playing with flowers, they're painting their faces,
right. There's nothing wrong with this civilization. And,
No, not really. And
cult, yes, but
yeah,
destructive cult.
it's
Question mark.
somewhere there on the how much value do you put on, the I put it, it's not the feeding this stone idol and all dressing alike, it's the lack of choice as to
But
whether
what is
or
that
not.
even supposed to mean? Like lack of choice.
Mm,
They're happy.
that's true, but but have they
Why,
chosen that path? Yeah, I know. It's kind of
why
like,
are we? Well, clearly they have. I mean, they can get up and walk away anytime they want. None of them are. Right? I
can
mean,
they?
it's not like there's fences or something keeping them there, except for the fact I believe that this thing is controlling the environment in such a way that it
Yeah,
only allows them to live in a certain area. But if that's all you know, and your existence is one of, a pleasurable, pleasant experience, what's the problem? Why
hmm.
why does some
I
other
never thought of
culture
it that
get to,
way.
why does some other culture get to come in, introduce a bunch of conflict creating
Yeah,
subjects like
Patty
sex?
Federation
These
coming
people
in
are
and
immortal. They
saying,
don't need
we're
sex.
not self-determined, so we're going to show you how to be self-determined.
Well, exactly. It's like if a bunch of Scientologists landed there and said, "Well, this is all wrong, so we're going to show you how to do it right."
Hmm.
That is that again exact opposite of what the Prime Directive is supposed to do. And I'm only being a purist about this because one, that kind of upset me, the thing about violating the Prime Directive so blatantly and so
Yeah, yeah,
whimsically. Kirk just decides on his own that this is how it is. And two, this really does help highlight a very, very important part of the difference between a cult and a destructive cult. There's no abuse here. This isn't a matter of keeping these people ignorant, keeping them stupid. They're physically abused. It's the exact opposite.
yeah. They're basically having a very idyllic sort of life. However, I would be interested to find out how structured is that idyllic life, how what opportunities are there to be the different one. Being an eccentric myself, I would want to know how, I mean, you know, here, speaking with the girl who's got the purple hair, would I be allowed to dye my hair purple when everybody else is blonde?
But
Would
would it
I
even
be,
occur to you to,
that's true. It
you
wouldn't
know?
even occur to me. So
Exactly. So
I
would you really
I
be
tend to disagree here
unhappy?
a little with you, but that's okay too. We can definitely disagree here
Yeah.
that I don't like the fact that they don't have any choice, but at the same again, I agree with you that what they do have is very pleasant.
Right. And before people go too far off or, you know, or painting, you know, burning me in effigy or something, let's keep in mind that it's not like you and I have this infinite array of choices that we get to make every day
No.
about our lives. You know, yeah, sure, you can color your hair purple, fine, but that doesn't mean you get to, you know, I don't get to paint my whole apartment purple.
No.
The landlord's going to say something about that, right? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
get to go hang out naked on my porch. I don't get to,
You
you know,
can
drive
in Vermont.
a car wherever I want. I don't get to go out into a public place and say whatever I want. I don't get to go to a store and do whatever I want there. We
No,
are
you can't.
limited all over the place by
We are
societal
limited by the,
conventions,
yeah. You can in
etc. So,
Vermont though. You can be naked out on your porch in Vermont.
boom.
Sorry.
Let's
I
go to
am
the next one.
I am the queen of too much information. Okay, now this is the one that everybody thinks of first when they think of Star Trek culty.
Huh.
Return of the Archons, season 1, episode 22. And this is basically they have been told that they're looking for this ship called the SS Archon, and they go to this planet, and this one, everybody's very robotic and smiling a little bit too much. There's that one creepy guy
Yeah.
who's like, ah, and everybody, hi there, blessed to you. What a wonderful day. Very Stepford wives.
Right. And that's because
They're,
everybody's basically in a sort of this weird trance state that's
they're all in
enforced
a
on them.
trance state. They
Right.
all look
And this
brainwashed.
and this is and see now this is the exact counter to what we were just talking about. And this is where you do have destructive influence because you now you've got people whose mental state is being messed with in a
Mhm,
purposeful and premeditated way to
mhm,
force them to exhibit a
mhm.
mood they don't feel,
Yeah.
behavior they don't want to engage in, you know, and
Mhm,
they know that they have that there is another way of being and that they don't want this way,
mhm.
but they have to be this way.
Yeah.
And that's where you are overriding people's
Oh, yeah.
self-determinism.
And
And
that's very sci-fi control, which we'll get into in a bit.
yeah,
But at the same time, there's also um, they've got these monks running around. I am the will of Ransu, and they point a rod at Sulu, and automatically Sulu's one of them. This is
right.
not how brainwashing works. This is not
Well,
how.
obviously symbolic. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
that's the sci-fi element. But
yeah,
I'll
that's the
tell you,
sci-fi.
I'll tell you, it doesn't take long sometimes.
Mm.
You grab somebody and you drag them into a Scientology organization or I don't know, a Kabbalah organization or,
Yeah,
you know, even a
yeah.
church sometimes.
Hmm.
And you start reading scriptures or start reading to them or they, you know, they do their personality test. I mean, within a space of about 3 hours, 4 hours, you can
You
definitely
can
have
get
a
them.
profound effect on somebody's life.
Indeed. However, I would say that you would not have the peaceful automatons all walking
Oh
in
God, no, no.
no,
But
yeah,
clearly that
that's
was a
totally, yeah,
that's a,
that's
a
totally,
sci-fi device.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a sci-fi device, or
yeah,
being, or that one very scary scene where all of a sudden the computer, Landrew, orders all the people to pick up sticks and stones and chase after them. Also noted is the fact that they've got their own little purge going on.
yep,
Years before the purge, they've got the red hour where everybody goes crazy and
right. Because that's how they let out. That's how they must have. I'm imagining that they must have set something like that up because you have built a society where it's similar in a way to what was that movie? Equilibrium. Equilibrium is the movie.
Equilibrium, yeah, because that's
It's a
basically.
drug-controlled
Mhm,
culture, right? And
mhm,
equilibrium has everybody taking a pill, no emotions, right? Or
yeah,
emotions are so suppressed that they're sort of there. You sort of get the thoughts of the emotions, but you're not really feeling much of anything,
no, no, you're
right?
just
And
basically this flattened affect of, yeah,
yeah,
nothing,
and this is Brave New World, right? Soma, etc. So,
all
so
of
you
that.
have
Yeah.
sort of this. So the cult control mechanism is this sort of, again, the sci-fi device of, you get Stepford wives with the pills, but of course with the Stepford wives, they were actually, I
They
don't know.
were they were animatronics.
Yeah, they weren't even people anymore.
Yeah, they yeah.
But I think the purge thing, of course, is supposed to be a nod to, well, they have to let the emotions out somehow. You got to let the cork off the bottle at some point to let all the pressure out. So they do these purge deals, but otherwise the society is, and you
Very,
can see everybody kind of in the distant past possibly even agreeing to something like this.
yeah, and that's the real social control that I'm interested in, because look at the older men who are supposedly immune. They've still got this learned helplessness and falling to their knees in fear, trembling in fear when confronted with this holographic projection of Landru, the old leader.
Exactly.
And
So the
then,
leader, so here you have machines keeping a cult leader or an authoritarian leader alive,
mhm.
imagery, symbolism, etc. So all the tropes are there, but it's yeah, definitely worth the honorable mention.
Yeah, I can see though this point where Kirk threw the prime directive out
Yeah,
the window.
here is a case where you're looking at a subjugated population,
Oh yeah, very
right?
subjugated.
And that's
Um,
that's a very different situation from the Vol, you
yeah,
know, happy blonde people situation. And
yeah,
I
the
and
death
I and I think it's worth
rockets.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's worth differentiating these two things,
Oh yeah, yeah,
because
they're very interesting counterpoint. The
yeah,
other thing is also there they have the whereas in the Apple, welcome to our village. You're now our guest, and it's in Return of the Archons. It's you are not of the body.
exactly.
Very pod people.
Yes. They're us versus
I
them.
can't do that noise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, the people, the thing, the Vol people, the happy blonde people, right, are accepting, open, in
Mhm,
communication, willing to welcome anybody in, they're peaceful, they're cooperative. There's not a lot of depth there, and
yeah,
perhaps through the course of continued involvement with that civilization, if you want to, throw the prime directive out the window, um, then have the Federation slowly go in there and start working with them or something, or set up an outpost somewhere else
mhm,
on the planet and have a little communication back and forth. But this setup here, where this entire population is being subjugated, you
yeah,
just go, okay, well, even if y'all agreed to it generations back, and I'm just making that up, who knows how this came
yeah.
about?
Who knows what kind of war happened? What kind of
Right.
um, you know, miselection, some sort of
Exactly. Who knows? But
propaganda thing that made everybody.
yeah, but
Um,
but
yeah,
the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we've got a slave society.
yeah. And they're also literally remote controlled at one point. That's the
Right.
sci-fi control again. But
Right.
there's also the fear of, once again, learned helplessness. What else are going back to Gamesters of Triskelion, where Kirk says, "Well, you could do something else," and the love interest du jour says, "But where else is there to go?"
Mm-hmm.
That echoes for me exactly what your second generation, third generation born in
Right.
member says. What else would I do? Where else would I go? Or even an abused spouse. There's nowhere else for me. Nobody else would love me. There's the idea that there is no, as Margaret Singer says, one of the big bells is there is nothing existing outside of the group. The person cannot literally imagine themselves as not a member of the group.
Right. And in
But
the case of the Triskelions and stuff, it's simply and only because they've never
they've
been given
never.
any other possibility or option.
Mhm.
And again, let's keep in mind to differentiate this from the happy blonde people, um, their life is one of of violence and subjugation and pain.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're not
And
talking about happy people living a
no,
happy life
they're
and
vended, they're put in, they're staying in pink cell blocks, which would drive me absolutely out the wall. And all of that.
right. Well, it
But
was pink cell blocks pretty much that did it.
yeah, it's the pink cell blocks that did
Pretty
it.
much. All
Pretty
right. Well, what's our number one
Okay,
here?
number one, The Taste of Armageddon. Now, this one for me is the highest level of control. Okay, first of all, the Enterprise is under orders to get diplomatic relations with a planet, and they get there and they're told, "Go away. You can't come where because we're in the middle of a war." They look around, everything looks very, as Spock says, extremely peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely peaceful. Turns out they're in a computer math war where their computer says, okay, this city has been targeted, this virtual device has been, this list of people are now dead, and now these intelligent, independent, free thinking people, these citizens of this otherwise peaceful culture, voluntarily walk into vaporization booths.
Mm-hmm.
How the heck? To the
Well,
tune of
I'll tell
1
you.
to 3 million a year
Yeah.
for over 600 years.
Yeah. I don't know how the math works in terms of, keeping their population going and keeping essential workers going and stuff like that. I have no
Yeah.
idea how all that calculus works out for something like this. I'm sure you could design a system where it could work and you could still be doing this
Yeah,
on a
you
regular
need a
basis.
lot of extra people and a universal basic income, I think.
Well, yeah, or there's lots of ways I think it could be done, but they don't address any of that, of course, in the episode. The idea is all around this theme of, getting people to, and this is season one stuff where they were a little bit more thoughtful about things. The writing
Yeah,
was a bit
yeah.
deeper than it got later, and other than the fish head costumes, of course.
Oh God, yeah.
Uh,
That's the other thing is you'd have to be forced to wear. You'd have to force
Yeah,
me to
you
wear
definitely have to force me to wear that. But point is that people who think that this might be incredibly, wholly unrealistic, no one would ever do that. That's crazy. You can never set up a society that way. I'll tell you right now, it's total horseshit. You could absolutely do this.
Oh yeah,
Um,
just convince
because,
people that not stepping into the booth means because they've got some great black and white thinking
yep,
here where if we do not do this, it will be horrible.
exactly. Well, they've got these grim consequences set up, and obviously there would be some kind of an enforcement arm here where if you didn't report to your booth, well, they're going to come and get you and kill you anyway. And I'm a little surprised they didn't include a rebel element in this whole thing in the
Yeah,
episode.
they don't.
But they didn't. The society was just totally kind of genned into this is how things are.
Yeah.
And it's interesting if you read. I mean, get real grim for a second, but it's the only thing that really compares. If you look at how many people were killed in World War II, how many Nazis rounded people up that during the roundup process and the transportation and logistics process and then the final killing process. And I'm going to talk very antiseptically about this because it's deeply disturbing, and I'm trying to just kind of keep myself from
Yeah.
getting too deep
Yeah.
into that. During this series of processes, there was not a lot of resistance. You'd think there'd be lots and lots of resistance to this, and
Mhm.
there's surprisingly not. So much so that this was commented on by many who were survivors and who were the Nazis
Yeah.
later, afterwards. They talked
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
Uh, Ordinary People by Christopher Browning is an incredible book to read about this because it's about German police forces and how they were
Mhm.
made into Nazi killers. And
Yeah.
so you have ordinary people, not Nazi soldiers, not people on the front lines, but regular people who'd stayed back home, not getting involved in the war effort, but now suddenly they are getting involved in the war
Yeah,
effort.
because there's,
And they're killing people wholesale,
yeah,
and they talk about how the only point I wanted to make here with this is they themselves, in talking about it in retrospect, were constantly surprised at how easily it was to round these people up, march them out into the forest, line them up, and shoot them. And as grim and disgusting and horrible as it is for me to bring that up, I kind of have to on this episode because it seems like it's sci-fi, it's Star Trek. That's so silly. That would never happen.
it's happened.
This did happen.
It did happen. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's not beyond human, behavior to have something like this happen. Of course, the question nobody seems to be asking during this whole episode is, why are we at war?
Yeah. Why? Because
Why?
they don't want. Yeah. This war has been going on for 600 years. Now I'm trying to think of what the longest. I think it was between England and France for a period of 115. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back to my history channel to do that. Yeah, you've got a whole population where there doesn't seem to be any class distinctions. There doesn't seem to be any outgroup. There doesn't seem to be any, like you said, I didn't see any rebel groups. And when they go to shoot up, when Spock goes to shoot up one of the vaporization booths, the attendants are unarmed.
Right. That's right. Because Kirk and Spock start disrupting this activity.
Yeah. And they're not shot back at.
Right.
Nobody on that planet has weapons, not even in their major war room.
Yeah. And obviously that was a thematic license or liberty because they clearly wouldn't have a society like this without some degree of enforcement of these rules, even after 600 years. It's
even after 600 years, you'd still have somebody kicking up a fuss.
Exactly. You definitely would, because everybody can talk the talk and walk the walk as long as things are fine. But when it comes down to rubber meets the road and you're supposed to go report to be vaporized, it actually is a little shocking how many people will just go do it, but it's also a certainty that a certain percentage of people will not, under any circumstances, go walking into that booth of their own accord. So you get both, and I am saying, for the record, that it will be a smaller percentage of people who won't do it. You'll get a larger percentage of people who will comply because we know how people are, and we know this.
Yeah.
But you're definitely going to get a resistance, and to not account for that, not have that part of the picture is a bit unrealistic.
Though I will say, and I'm not sure of this, but I was hearing John and Christian talk about this, that the Milgram-esque studies, the compliance studies,
the conformity experiments,
studies, that actually, if you ran one back in the 1960s, 1950s, and you run one now, you're going to have significantly different numbers of people who will comply because our culture has been getting less collective. We're less compliant now than we were in 1950.
That's an interesting piece of information that I am sure is true. That makes sense.
Yeah. Because if you take a look at the society that you and I were born into, for one thing, there were less than half the amount of people globally.
Yes. That's a factor.
That is a factor. There were half as many people on the planet as there are now.
Which is kind of shocking.
Yeah.
I think because probably it must be the fish hats.
It must be the fish hats. It's got to be the fish-shaped hats
because lacking guns or some other form of enforcement, there must be something to those fish hats because they are the most ridiculous looking hats. I mean, all the costume design they did,
all of the costumes,
man.
All of the Star Trek costumes, right through to Next Gen, were just like, ooh. Even the Maquis costumes that they wear in Star Trek Voyager are kind of like, really? Earth tones?
I, I have differing opinions on the various uniforms of the Star Trek universe, but
Mm.
I think you and I definitely agree on the fish hats.
The
These are
fish hats, yes. Well, just don't slip on a red uniform or a yellow uniform if you're in next gen.
That's right. That's right. Well, that was it. That was our
That
number
was
one.
it. That was the yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow
Well,
stuff, man.
yeah. That was any final thoughts you would think about how Trek treats cults?
Well, it had a pretty, original series, of course, had a pretty 60s take on things,
Hmm.
which a lot of attitudes still carry forward, in terms of the things we're worried about with authoritarianism and with overreach from the government or overreach
Hmm.
from various corporations or groups. And so we're still dealing with these various human problems of organization and authoritarianism.
Hmm. And who
And
we get.
I think in many ways Star Trek is still trying to be relevant talking about these things or theming. I mean, you got Star Trek, you got Picard show now and you got a few other
Mhm.
iterations of stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
think
I
it did
will
a better
say.
job of that in its earlier iterations and original series, and I guess I wasn't a big fan of Next Generation, but I know that at least they were taking on some of these themes and
It's
stuff.
hit or miss with some of those episodes. Like
Yeah.
last night's episode, and I'm blanking on which one it was. I was thinking, my God, this definitely has this overreach of authority going on again.
Mm.
They definitely do have a few, quite a few little episodes where they have, and sometimes it's even the Federation itself.
Right. I noticed that was one element they were using in the Picard show was making out that the media was critical of the Federation on Earth, and the Federation was doing bad things, and we have to work against the Federation. And I'm kind of like, okay, now they finally arrived there where the good guys become the bad guys.
Hmm.
And it's like it's kind of I get it. I get how that works. It's certainly a reflection of societal attitudes and stuff these days, but it's a little bit of a shame because it's just such an overused trope. Also, it
It
seems
is.
like eventually that always happens. Why
I
can't the
will say with
Federation
the
just be a good group of folks who are just doing good work out there? Why does it always have to be that corruption settles
yeah, why
in?
can't it just be straight out adventure? Though I will say, if you want to look at recovery from a cult group and a good, recognizable recovery arc, you can't go better than the Borg Seven of Nine and
Mm,
her path from automaton to human being. For those who don't know, she was in Voyager. She basically is this human that was assimilated as a little girl and then spent her entire life to adulthood as a Borg drone and then is taken away from the collective and given humanity. There's a couple places where they do that next gen too. They have one Borg where they take him away from the collective and all of a sudden he becomes his own little guy.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, that's that, and that, of course, whole nother
That's a whole other
theme.
discussion.
You
Yeah,
will be assimilated, etc.
you will
So
be intimidated.
I think this is a theme that recurs often in the Star Trek universe through the generations of the show. The fight against suppression or oppression, the pushback, the desire for individuality versus collective thinking. I mean, we see these things and over and over again. And I and sometimes when the stories are compelling, I'm down, and sometimes when they're not, I'm not. Because you get to the point where we're at, where we're not little kids watching the show anymore.
No, we're
We're very
adults. Yeah.
grown ass adults watching, looking back on it. So does it do a good job of presenting those themes and laying those out in some stories? Yeah, sometimes it really does, and
Sometimes it does. Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I've been a Star Trek fan because of its original themes and ideas of a more utopian future where we can all get along and where money's not a thing and where
But we
cooperation
still
is a
bet
thing.
in poker. We
Yeah,
still bet in poker. We don't have money. What are they betting with?
who knows?
What are
Chips,
they using to gamble with in poker?
chips.
I don't know. I like it better in Voyager, where when they're gambling with replicator rations and duty shifts.
Okay. I was just thinking about the fact that not having money in the Federation might be interesting, but when they're going to interact with other cultures, they're going to have to come up with some method of
Yeah,
exchange.
they need something to barter with.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
kind of interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. I don't know that that one was really well thought through, actually, now that I sit here thinking about it. Anyway, as
We're
far
playing
as the
poker
cult
every
stuff
Friday night.
goes,
Yeah.
you know,
But actually, the reason that I was giggling was because there is one episode of Voyager where they go back in time to 1990, and some of the crew ends up being captured by a militia, a United States gun-toting militia, and the guy gives a whole speech to them about, you are the drive towards collectivism and I am the drive towards individuality.
interesting.
And yet they're in this little cultish group themselves with guns and trying to, yeah, it's an
Hmm.
interesting episode.
I've never
Yeah,
watched
yeah,
a single episode of Voyager. I'll have to get onto that.
yeah, it's an interesting, it's the third to fourth season, you know how they did
Sure.
cliffhangers on the
Cool.
end. But in any case, so this has been 10 times that Star Trek got culty with my wonderful guest Chris Shelton, and thank you very much, Chris. You helped me very much bounce this off.
Thanks
And
for having me.
yeah, and thank you for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.
I am the